Hi everyone, this is Grace, and today I'm going to be walking you through how I made this sports party set. So let's go. Now, this is one of two sports classes I have recently launched, and this is the more advanced one. Then there is a much simpler beginner one, which I will share later. Starting off strong here with the tennis ball. So this entire set is made with circles. Y'all know I love a one shape set. And it's called Sports Party because there are quite a few different lettering options. So you can do this for a baby shower, a birthday, any kind of sports party, or like a bachelor party. Tons of options, but I'll get to the lettering options at the very end. What I did here with all of the designs is that I really took them to the next level of texture and next level of texture. But the thing that does is that it does make them more complicated. And some of the designs in this, I'm not going to lie, are pretty time consuming. Excuse me. Now, in the workbooks, and I'll explain it too, hopefully in this video if I remember to, there are other ways to kind of split the difference between this, like the complexity of what I do in this video versus the super beginner class. So there are some ways to kind of find my brain here. Some of these definitely skew more intermediate. I call this advanced beginner / intermediate, but I give you some options for how you can make it more truly advanced beginner. You could make this entire set of sports balls as is, or you could just pick one and combine this with some other designs, whatever makes your heart happy. But I wanted to give a good number of classic sports options. There are some that I left off. I did not include pickleball. I did not include a softball, but you can do the baseball that we do later exactly the same with this color, because tennis balls and softballs are essentially the same color. And then I forget the color of the stitching, if it's red or if it's pink on softballs. But that's a modification that you can very easily do. A pickleball also uses this color, and it's just a simple cutouts. Like just use the same outline consistency. Draw some circles in the center of the cookie as the cutouts for the pickleball, and then just fill that in. I know I make it sound really easy. It is really easy. I think it is easy. Okay. I started off with the tennis ball because this is actually my favorite from the set, believe it or not. Well, actually, no. I don't know if it's my favorite. It's certainly my favorite to make. The soccer ball later is an absolute favorite, but not my favorite to make because it takes forever. This is a really classic execution of a tennis ball with this bear technique. In the beginner class, we don't do that cutout in the center, and we just use sanding sugar, but that would be a good, like, in the middle option to do this cutout, an advanced beginner option. Do the cutout, but then instead of doing this bear technique, just cover the sections with sanding sugar instead. The bear technique isn't like hard per se. It just takes more time. You have to let this icing dry a lot, like a few hours. It needs to be able to withstand a solid amount of pressure. I cannot tell you how many times I have poked holes in my icing when doing the bear technique like this because I was impatient and didn't want to wait long enough for it to dry. This football here is the only one that's not a circle right now, but that's because I took a circle and then I chopped off a bit of it to create more of the football shape. That was keeping in line with my goal of making this all with circles. But if you want to use an actual football cutter, more power to you. I forget the orientation of which side I chopped off, but I believe I mentioned that in the class. Because when you chop off part of it, you're using the circle cutter, the same cutter. One side of it looks like it. There's kind of a right side up and a wrong side down. If that makes sense. I think this might be that I chopped the top of this off. Anyway, so this is the more advanced way to make this football. Again, so if we're going to make this into advanced beginner, let's say this is the intermediate version, the advanced beginner version, just flood the entire thing brown, and then you can just do the stitching on top. I do a lot of flooding in sections in this set, and what that does is it just creates dimension in what I think is one of the coolest techniques, things you can achieve with royal icing that you can't with other kinds of icing. Like, look at that. How cool is that? Okay. My tip always for flooding against those seams is to really do your best to do one flood and that's it. Like, because the more you mess with the icing next to the seam, the messier it gets. You want like a clean, smooth seam between the two sections of icing. If you have to use your scribe, just don't get closer than like a couple millimeters from the seam. And you'll know what I mean once you start getting too close to it. You'll like have a jagged seam instead of a nice smooth one. I don't know what it is about these side stitching things for footballs, but I always have such a struggle with them. I don't know. Getting them to have like an even, how do you say, curve to them. Always such a struggle bus for me. What else can I say about this set? I did try to color match everything as best as possible. That tennis ball was the bane of my existence, getting that color right, but I think I succeeded. This here, we are poking holes to prevent craters. This is my favorite technique to prevent craters. I find it to be the most consistent, and I actually find it works better the drier the base is, which is not the case for other prevention of crater techniques. Excuse me, I seem to have a frog in my throat today. I should go get myself some water. And then the key here is to use that scribe to get the icing into all the corners. And you're actually taking the scribe and you're like pulling the icing to lay on top of the corner. And that's what's going to give you the most seamless look. Now, if your icing is way too thick that you outlined with, like there's nothing you can really do to create a seamless look if your outline is too thick. That's just like ship has sailed, my friend. What is next? Oh, this is the baseball. So you can see with some of the cookies, I do use an edible marker to sketch out the sections. Not necessary. You can skip that. You can use like a scribe to sketch out the different sections. I do that sometimes. If you are going to use a marker though, just don't go all the way to the edge. You can see what those sections I marked off, because, you know, if your outline doesn't go all the way to the edge, then you have edible marker peeking through, which is not ideal, right? And then my trick with this one especially is you can see that I started and ended, that's the outline, where the seam was, because especially with a circle, the starts and the ends of the circle just never look perfect. And so my tip is always to start and end at a junction of some sort. So in this case, that junction is the section that's going to end up being covered in stitching anyway. Now, this is the intermediate version to do the flooding in sections like this. Easy way to make this advanced beginner, just flood the whole thing white. Now you are going to see in a minute when I get to the stitching, I did question myself. I was like, Grace, was it really necessary to do the flooding in sections when you see how I did the stitching in the end? Up for debate. In fact, I often judge people who do what I'm about to do. And I'm like, y'all, don't waste your time doing the flooding in sections. I don't know. It just made sense in my head. So I rolled with it. Rolled, because we're working with sports balls. Okay. My white icing, by the way, to get it a nice bright white, I do use gel food coloring. Using that scribe again to get the icing into all the precious little corners. That's what's going to give you the most seamless, pun intended, perfect look there. And then we're just going to let that crust over. And this is where you're like, Grace, what was the point of the flooding in sections? Does this make a difference? It does make a small difference. It's the fact that I'm filling in the seam with a line. You could potentially, I suppose, not actually fill this in and just do the stitching. I didn't think about that. I didn't try that, clearly, but that's an option. And the key with the stitching is you want to make contact, lift, contact, lift. So you're making contact at the end, the middle, or the beginning, the middle, and the end of every stitch. It's hard to see, but I am lifting my bag up like a millimeter off the surface, and that's what's giving me a nice clean line. If you're getting beads at the beginning and ends of your lines, that means you have too much icing on the end of your bag before you're lifting off, and you are taking too long to release the bag at the end. That's really like a more advanced thing to pay attention to. Generally speaking, like beginner, advanced beginner cookiers, I just want to see that you can do a clean line without breaks. That's my goal. And that's the baseball. Like I said, swap this with the color of the tennis ball, and then I forget the color of the stitching for softballs, but that will give you a softball. Next up, we are rocking the soccer ball. Now, this technique I'm doing here, how necessary is this? I don't know. I talk about that in class. Moving on. Okay. The point of that, though, if I can just show this on camera in the next universe, is to mark off the different sections of the soccer ball. You could just cut out the circle and poke the holes in the corners of the drawing that's already there. I don't know why I didn't really think of that in the first place, but I had this tissue paper because part of what I teach in this class is how, or introduce you to, because I don't use this method, is to use the tissue paper for lettering. There are three main ways to do lettering. You can freehand, tissue paper, or projector. So anyway, we'll talk about that when we get to lettering. Okay, so this really is a labor of love, but I think it's absolutely worth it. And all we're doing right now, excuse me, apparently I need a water and a coffee today, is you want to mark off all of the sections. Again, this is an edible marker. Do your best not to go all the way to the edge. They do not have to look perfect. Okay, clearly mine do not. You still get the gist that it is a soccer ball, my party people. The key to this design is flooding in sections, okay? So what I'm marking off here are all of the black sections. Everything else is going to be white. And the way that you get definition in between all those sections is you do this thing called flooding in sections, where you flood a section, let it crust, flood the one next to it. Otherwise, the sections would all melt together. And the first thing, well, after we're sketching it out, now we are going to outline all of the sections with a piping consistency. This is going to keep the icing all in its place. Kind of the hardest part, well, not one of the hardest parts about this many sections is you just have to figure out how many to do at a time. And the goal is to do as many as you can in each go, because like the more rounds you have to do, just the longer it takes. There, I had a little, I don't know, was that an air bubble? Something. Easy fix, easy peasy. Make sure you're lifting your bag off the surface of the cookie as always. In these small lines, I'm just doing it very, very short lines. And then I'm doing these squiggles to help prevent craters. I'm doing them as generously as I can, not going all the way to the edge, doing them pretty tight, close to the surface of the cookie. And then you want to flood these sections as generously as you can without actually over flooding. That's also going to help prevent any potential craters that might come along. And then again, as always, use that scribe to get the icing into all the corners. Flooding in sections with something like this where there are so many corners, the success here is going to be getting the icing into all of the corners. That's going to give you the most seamless look. Let that crust for 10 to 15 minutes. Then we're going in with round 2. I personally do not let my squiggles dry. It just makes sense to me. I don't know if there's like a real rhyme or reason to let them dry or not, but I don't. I squiggle and then I go immediately in to flood. I will say that it is pretty hard to overflood the inner sections here, but all of those outer sections that I'm about to do are quite easy to overflood. Normally, I would prefer to wait to do that center section last because you can really like go ham on adding more icing to it when you do it last, and that gives you like the most 3D dimension, whatever. But for the sake of time and already having to do, I think I have to do 4 rounds to finish these sections. I just decided, like, I would have had to do it as a 5th round, and I was like, y'all, can't do that. Uh, at least I think. Or maybe I just would have had to do the black first. I don't know. I wanted to finish with the black, okay? It just made sense in my head. Just made sense. So this is what I mean. These outer sections are pretty easy to overflood. Let that crust again, 10 to 15 minutes, and we are repeating the same step. Again, like I said, for the white, I do add white gel food coloring. You could add the tiniest bit of purple to offset, because the thing is, with your icing, my icing uses lemon juice, which gives it the tiniest yellow tint. Or if you're using vanilla extract, it's going to give it the tiniest bit of tint. And to counteract that kind of yellow tint, you want to add purple to it. But I'm way too afraid to do that, so I just use white gel food coloring. For the black that we're using here, the key to black is to allow the color to develop. I start my black, if I can, 48 hours in advance, but I would say minimum 24 hours before decorating, because then I can color it in stages and make sure that I'm not using too much gel food coloring. The key to not overcoloring your black is to have a very dark gray in the bowl before you bag your icing, because as you bag it, as you decorate, as it dries, it's going to continue to darken. And so if you start with a saturated black in the bowl, it's just going to get that means you have too much gel food coloring because it's already fully saturated to a dark black. The one thing to keep in mind too with my videos is that I have a video editor, but he does like, improve the color here. So this does look like a super rich black here. And to be totally honest, I don't remember what exactly it looked like in person. But often in my editing, like I end up, upping the saturation a little bit on the color just for the sake of the video, which makes the color not totally accurate to real life. But anyway, I digress. I would say another key to the soccer ball is the orientation that I chose for the sections. Because like when you look up, drawings of soccer balls, there are different orientations of the sections that you can use. And I found this to be the most dynamic one. In the class workbook, I do give you printouts to scale of the soccer ball and the volleyball, and I potentially one other one, I can't remember. But definitely the soccer ball and the volleyball. So you can print those out to scale and be able to sketch the sections on. And that is the gorgeous soccer ball. What's next? Okay, this is the basketball. When it comes to sports, basketball is the only sport I actually like. It might be because it's the only sport I can actually play. And by play, it's a very like vague statement. I played as a kid and I actually started taking private lessons last year just to revisit for funsies. But I'm too scared to even make it to a game. So like we're not going to talk about it. Anyway, but so basketball is close to my heart is the point of this story. I am 6 foot tall, which sidebar for my entire adult life. I thought I was 5'11". Turns out I'm 6 foot. Who knew? Very exciting in the world of me. When I was in middle school, I was 5'8". So yeah, I definitely made the basketball team just because I was tall. Okay, let's talk about this cookie. So we outlined it first, let that crust. Then we're just going to go in and flood the whole shebangaroo. Oh, I forgot to say with the soccer ball, the way to make that advanced beginner, just flood the whole thing white. And then the design with the sections, just use black piping consistency to outline all the sections and then fill in the black ones as a second layer. And that would make it advanced beginner. This one here is a simple adjustment to make it from like the intermediate to advanced beginner. We're going to add black lines in a hot minute. Okay. All you have to do for the advanced beginner, just do the black lines. After we add these lines, then we're going to add these little like texture dots on it to give you the texture of the basketball. Someone did say when I shared this on social somewhere, they were like, oh, I can't believe you didn't do crackle on the basketball. I did think about that, but the issue with doing crackle is that I think the black lines really do need to be a second layer. And if you put black lines on top of crackle or any line on top of crackle, it would just look terrible, basically. Because the lines it's like trying to pipe lines on top of gravel. Like it's going to be super uneven. The dots here, I would say like I did an easier version of these dots because they're a little bit on the bigger side. You could cut an even smaller tip and just means you have to do even more dots. This is actually a flood consistency in a much smaller bag, so you can cut a much smaller tip. I do that instead of a piping consistency because the dots instantly settle. Like if you do piping, they're going to have little peaks on them, right? And it's too many dots to be thinking about little peaks on dots. The one downside to doing the flood is that they are going to spread out a little bit. So in hindsight, like maybe I coulda, shoulda, woulda cut an even smaller tip on this, but my friends, this is enough dots. This is enough dots. I don't know where my hand went. Oh, I had to regroup. I do think it makes sense to do them methodically like this. Someone did ask, they're like, what are the dots for? It's just for the texture of the basketball. A basketball has texture on it. It's not totally flat. Like what? Are baseballs totally flat? Yeah, because they're like leather. Well, wait, are basketballs leather too? I don't. Yes, they are. But then how do you get the texture? Whatever. Y'all, this is not what I get paid to do. So anyway, that's the basketball. Next up, we have the volleyball. Starting off with the same technique that we did my brain today, soccer ball. Wow. So tracing all the sections because you guessed it, we are going to be flooding in sections, my party people. This one is another one where to make this advanced beginner, which really simplifies it, all you have to do is flood the whole thing white. And then most people will use like a black piping consistency to then just do these outlines on the top of the white. And that really simplifies it. This one, I love the dimension and the texture that is achieved through the flooding in sections. Like it just makes my heart so happy. Does it make the time worth it? That's only something you can answer, I think. um, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so starting off strong with outlining the sections. So it's hard to see, especially in this video, but I had those pinpricks from the scribe to know where each section is going to start and finish. And then I kind of have to just eyeball the curve. Yeah. If you need more guidance though on the curves, you could always like poke a hole in the center of the line. I don't know. Whatever works for you, my party people. So this is a soft peak piping consistency. This entire set, we are doing a 1 consistency outline and flood. So outlining with a piping, flooding with a flood. I believe the flood for this entire set is a thin flood. And in the workbooks and the class workbooks, I tell you exactly how much icing you need for every color and consistency. Again, the trick here is to map out what sections to do when. And I think I accomplished this in 3 goes. If you need to, you can always write a number down, like for all the 1, the 2, the 3. I think for the most part, I remember, but I think on one of these, I accidentally did the wrong, like I did something wrong on one of them, which made me take 4 goes to finish this, which was super annoying. There's a fly zooming around my house right now. It's just that season where like that one fly, you kill it, and then just one more comes around, and you're like, where did you come from? Anyway, so same deal as with the soccer ball, using that scribe to get to the corners. By the way, this scribe is the PME scribe. There are 2 PME scribes on Amazon. This is the thinner one. It's really hard to tell from the picture which one's which. The thicker one is just more like a standard scribe. The one I'm using though is the thin one, and I have, by the way, drawn blood with that scribe. I did buy a new one after I did that, but be careful because it's very sharp. But I love that scribe for just more fine detail stuff. So when I work, I always have 3 scribes with me. I have that yellow one, which is my like detail work one. I have like a standard metal scribe, my favorite from Borderlands Bakery. They don't produce them anymore, and I have a bunch of them stockpiled. And then the third one is the Thingamagenie by the Cookie Countess. It's the pink plastic thing that you see me using periodically. It has a scribe end, and then it has like a flat end for fixing things. It's what I use to scrape my cookies if you've ever seen a scraping video. I love having that on hand for a variety of things, whatever. I don't think I ever use the scribe end of it now that I'm thinking about it. I don't think I do. The larger the tip of your scribe, the more icing it manipulates, for better or for worse. Now, like I said, with the soccer ball, one of the keys to success here is really refining the corners and the seams. So I do my best on the long seam to just do that in one go. Like you can see here, well, in a second you'll see here, we're doing the usual ziggy-zaggy squiggles to prevent craters. So let's see. So here we go. So I'm using the scribe, but when I'm finessing towards the middle, I really just keep in the center as much as I can. You can see I don't get very close to the seam, but then it's inevitable that you have to use the scribe to get into all the little nookies and crannies of the corners. This is really a labor of love. think that's pretty clear. Truly a labor of love, but worth it, right? In the end, I think. I hope so. If you struggle with getting good circles with your cookies, first of all, I am not perfect. Mine are not as good as they look. Also, I always pick the most perfect circles for filming. Like, duh, guys, come on. But if you need some help with circles, I do have a blog post on tips for getting better circles with your cookie dough. I have a few tips and tricks that I use. And at the end of the day, like, I mean, mine are not all perfect. And it, in any set, like, it's pretty easy to just pick the ones that would skew more towards it being okay for it not to be a perfect circle, if that makes sense. Like, I think this set is, well, this set's a little bit hard because they're all literally balls. But that's what I do. Like, when I sit down before I start decorating, if I'm doing a one shape set, and maybe some of my cookies are a little wonky, I always divide out first how many cookies go for each design. And I will look at each cookie and be like, okay, can this one be a little more oval, a little less round, depending on the design? And I will like divide and conquer that way. But I always pick the best looking cookie to film. Cause like, obviously, guys. And I do use like the same cookie for every step. I used to not do that when I first started decorating. I would just pick up whichever one was next, or like whichever one was in front of me. I didn't like make sure that I was always filming the same cookie. I don't know why I didn't think that was important. Not that it's like crucial, but it's since I really focus on the satisfying element of my faster videos, I do think it's important that it is the same cookie. Anyway, sidebar. So this is the golf ball, and this uses a technique that I did not come up with. I mean, I didn't come up with wet on wet, obviously, but even this design element, I've done this on golf balls and I've done this on beer. It's also very common for like the bubbles in beer or really any drink that has bubbles. You start by using the black to draw circles, and you can see that I'm like outlining and flooding in the center. I'm not just like squeezing the bag until enough icing comes out to make the right size circle, because you're going to add way too much icing that way. And then you do like an offset circle on top, and that's what gives you the like essence of the little kind of divots, holes, whatever they're called. They're not holes, but like divots, in a golf ball. But of course, you know me, I could not stop here. A lot of people will just do this for a golf ball, but I was like, y'all, this is the moment to do crackle. Like, if there is a moment in this set, it is for the golf ball. In the beginner class, I actually just do, sorry, I just like lost my train of thought. I just do the crackle on all white. Here we go. So this is actually a fondant tool that I got for free from CookieCon one year. And it's my favorite tool for doing crackle. It has two different ends to it. This is the smaller end, and then there's a bigger end. Because like, yes, the size of the ball, the end that you're using is going to affect the size of the crackle. And I start by waiting 10 minutes before I crackle. Sometimes it can take upwards of 20. It just like depends on the consistency of the icing and the environment that you're working in, all that good stuff. But if it's not crackling after like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, something is wrong with your icing. If it's indenting after 30 minutes, something's wrong. So that is the golf ball. Yay! Now, last but certainly not least, let's go over how to do the cookie for the lettering options. Now, this design, totally optional. You do not have to do this. And if you want to simplify this, you do not have to do this striped background. The inspiration for this was a ref's jersey. I know not all ref jerseys are black and white stripes, but a lot of them are. So that's the inspo here. But if you just want to flood this whole thing white, that will make your life 20 times easier because as you're about to see, this part's pretty time consuming. I do use an edible marker and a ruler to mark off all of the sections. I tried to make them as even as possible, but they're not all perfect. Like, excuse me. That yawn just hit me out of nowhere. That center one is like slightly bigger. A couple of notes. Do not just take the edible marker all the way to the edge, just in case you don't bring that outline all the way to the edge. It just makes that a royal pain in the bumpkins. I do outline all of the sections. I am not one to use an edible marker or to outline sections, do this kind of extra work unless it really makes a difference. And y'all, it really makes a difference with this one. It's going to keep the icing in the right spot. This is effectively a wet on wet design. It's just like wet next to wet. And I use that edible marker just to mark off. I think this is all the black, it's all the black sections, just so my brain has one fewer thing to think about. I'm using a thin flood here and a pretty small tip on the bag because you want to have maximum control over the icing at this stage. It's important that you're putting like even amounts of icing in each section so that it's flat. Otherwise, you might get kind of a wonky up and down situation. The most important thing is what I'm doing right now, which is to get the icing into all of the corners, okay? That's going to get you the cleanest look across, like line across. There are two different ways to do it. I'm not sure if I show, I think I probably show both. So this is the first one where you like essentially pipe a line and then you do flood pressure right next to it. This is all the same bag, just a different amount of pressure. The hardest part here is getting that clean line across. I don't know where that editing came in, but it's okay. Using this small scribe here again, getting the icing into the corners nice and neatly. Let's see what I do for this next one. Do I do the other way is the question. No, I guess I really committed to this one. So the other way to do it is you actually flood up next to the previous section first, flood the whole section, and then come back through and do a line on top of it. So I'm actually just going to speed up the rest of this and you can see how it gets finished. And now for the last bit of the agenda, which is to do the lettering. There are a few different lettering options here, all of which I had custom done by Arlena at Bossy Brushstrokes. She is a calligrapher, letterer. She's not a cookie person, but she does lettering. And whenever I need something custom for a class, I always go straight to her. This first one was the original inspiration for the whole thing, which is Little All-Star. This can be baby shower. This can be little kid's birthday. Anything for little kids cute. Little all-star. There are a couple of different, or actually 3 different types of lettering covered here. Well, in this whole set, this particular cookie, there are 2 different types of lettering. This is a pressure piped lettering here where it's consistent pressure the whole time. And it's actually harder than you might think to get a nice clean line when you're doing just a consistent pressure the whole time. And then that top one is, I don't know what you would call it, but just like regular script. I don't know, with a consistent pipe the whole time or consistent pressure. What I teach in my classes is what I'm doing right here, which is free-handed lettering. There are 3 different ways to approach lettering. There is free-handed here where you're using absolutely no assistance while lettering. Then there is the other extreme, which is using a projector, which I do have, and I have in the past used a projector, but these days I just cannot be bothered to take my projector out. So here we are. And also teaching that with a class, like for people to buy projectors, that's just like a whole other level of, I mean, don't get me wrong, projectors are super useful if you're doing large quantities and or, do freehanding just gives you too much of a heart attack, which I understand. Freehanding is always stressful, or not stress. Well, whatever. All lettering is stressful. Okay, Grace, focus. The third option is the tissue paper method, which I do teach how to do in my classes, but I don't actually do it because I just find it to be an inconsistent method. It's where you take a piece of tissue paper and you print out a 2-scale image of what you're lettering, and you take that tissue paper and an edible marker and you trace that design on the tissue paper, and then you take the tissue paper with the trace design and then you trace again on top of the cookie. And the whole idea is that the paper is so thin that the ink will like bleed through the paper onto the cookie. I actually tried that with this design and I do it in the class. The problem with this design is that the edible marker does not show up on the black icing. Not super helpful, is it? I also find that it can depend on what kind of edible marker you're using, how fine the tip is. Again, I just find it to be inconsistent, so I personally don't like to do it, but there are a lot of people out there who swear by it, and it's a nice kind of in the middle because you have something to go off of for the lettering. Now, if you don't place your icing perfectly on top of the outline, then you're going to see the edible marker outline through it, which again, not ideal. So I like to do freehanded lettering. In the classes, I do give you 2-scale images of all the lettering that you can print out, and you can practice to your heart's desire on those printouts first, and then do it on the cookie itself. I always say though, there's only so much practicing you can do. It's a different experience when you actually put it on a cookie, but it's nice to have the practice. You can see here that when I'm freehanding, I tend to pipe in weird orders to make sure that I'm getting the spacing correctly. Often I'll start in the center and then go center to the right and then start on the left, whatever. But it's always good to know what letter is going to be in the center of the cookie. So it's not perfect, but y'all is dang good and hashtag good enough. So in the class, I believe I only teach those 2 particular designs. I'm going to speed up through this one because it's just the same type of lettering as the previous 2. And then the last lettering I'm going to do here is one that's actually not shown in class. It's kind of the bonus option if you so choose. It is a different style of lettering where you're actually outlining and then filling it in. Use my brain here. Okay, outline, fill it in. You want to outline first with a piping consistency. Whether you choose to let that dry or not is totally up to you. I typically do not because I want a seamless look, but if you're a little nervous about whatever, you can let that dry first. This one was definitely the most stressful of all of them. And by the way, this is not real time. I'm just speeding this up a little bit because this is slow as molasses. Definitely stressful doing this outline and then filling it in. But I do think it's more forgiving than you might think. And that, my friends, is the entire set of cookies for this sports party class. What a doozy is this set. You can always make just what fits the bill, though, whatever particular balls you want, whatever lettering you want, no lettering, whatever makes your heart happy. As always, I hope you enjoyed listening and watching this video. Hope you learned a thing or two, and maybe you will even try to make these cookies yourself. Who knows? All right, y'all, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.